I live in a very pretty city in the heart of the Alps. It's a Grenoble. I'm surrounded by the mountains and I have very great landscape. It's spring, it's becoming warm and the weather is getting nice. So every morning I wake up, I work out, I do some running to start my day. And at this moment, it feels that the day starts very well and everything is fine. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't last long. I check my mailbox, plenty of notifications about some pull requests I have submitted a few days ago, other notifications asking me to review some other people pull requests. And at this moment, it feels the day is not gonna be fine and there is a drama about to start. Well, hi everyone. My name is Maha. I'm a senior DevOps engineer at Atos. I also have a PhD in optimizing performance of multi-tier distributed system deployed in the cloud. And today I'm gonna walk you through drama-free code review process. How we're gonna save our day from this drama. I believe that most of you, if not all of you, very often you create pull request and you submit pull request asking people to review it and give their opinion about this pull request and the code you created. Or you've been asked to review some other people in the team about their pull request. So at this moment, we can say that the code review has two folds. The first one is creating and submitting a pull request, and the second one is reviewing a pull request. Let's have a look at this piece of code. First of all, let me ask you, how many of you develop in Python? Not that many. Well, regardless of the programming language, this piece of code is in Python and it converts a list to a string. And if I am asked to give my opinion about these 2-3 lines of code, so I'm gonna start by looking at the variables. First of all, okay, those two variables, they don't have meaningful names, so we should really use meaningful names. Second of all, the second variable is in uppercase, so it doesn't follow the naming convention in Python. Last comment I'm gonna say, using this join function actually is not great. Why? Because there is a case where the input string contains both integer and strings. This code is not gonna work. So there is a corner case here, it's not covered by this code. So as you can see, simply 2-3 lines of code, I managed to give my opinion and find issues and bugs in that code, and there are some cases are not covered in this code. So basically, you can take it, this is what I did just right now. I give my opinion, I reviewed that code, and find issues in that code. So as I mentioned earlier, the pull request has twofold. The first one is submitting a pull request. Me as a developer or an author, when I submit pull request, asking people to give me their feedback and opinion about this code, I should keep few things in mind. First of all, when I submit pull request, I should provide a summary, a description, telling the people why I'm submitting this code, what's the goal, what I'm trying to do. That will help them to tell me their opinion, to better understand. So by submitting summary, telling them, okay, I had this context, I'm trying to achieve that, can you give me your opinion? Second of all, I need to add the right people, asking the right people to review my code. For example, if from my pull request, I'm trying to solve some performance issues, then I should ask people who are expert in the performance. When I'm trying to solve issues in security, then I should ask people who are expert in that domain. Of course, that will depend. If there are people involved in this component, you are modifying the code in that component, you should add them, of course. The third point is, before submitting any pull request and asking people to give their opinion, I should make sure that my pull request is complying with predefined what we call PR, pull request checklist. For example, in this checklist, I should always provide unit tests, make sure that my code passes all the tests. I'm gonna speak in the coming slides more details about what this pull request checklist. Well, last but not least, as an author, keep in mind that any comment about your code doesn't mean I'm criticizing you. So your code doesn't represent who you are. Don't take things personally, and that will save a lot of drama. Well, let's go to the second part. So the second part is reviewing the pull request itself. So me as a reviewer, I should start by getting the big picture from this pull request, and thanks to your summary that you provide with the pull request, so you give me some context, then I will be able to understand what you are trying to do. Second of all, if I don't understand something in this pull request, so don't hesitate to ask questions. And actually there are two parts in this point. So first of all, to clear ambiguities in this pull request. Second of all, when I try to write a comment, it would be very nice and recommended to form it in a question style. For example, instead of saying like there is a variable named ID, which I don't like it as a reviewer, and instead of saying, okay, change this variable ID to customer ID, it would be nicer and more acceptable to say, why don't you change this name, this variable to this name, to use this name? It's much clearer. So forming it in a question style, it's much nicer and more acceptable. The last point is as a reviewer. So code review is not always about finding bugs and issues, as I have shown you earlier. It's not just, okay, I want to point out all the bad things because I am the smarter. Like, okay, no, it's not just about that. It's also highlighting the good and the positive things in the pull request. Actually, that will motivate the developers to keep moving on and encourage them to look forward how to improve and how to really make the code is much nicer. So keep that in mind. Let's dig into more details how we can have an effective code review process. And as a team, before implementing any code review process, we should answer a few questions. The first question is to understand why we are doing the code review. I believe that most developers think that it's really a waste of time, code review, as long as I'm implementing my functionality and it passes all the tests and it works. So why I don't merge it to the main branch and we move on? Why I need to waste my time? Well, actually, no, there are plenty of reasons we do code review because we want to increase the quality of our code and overall the quality of our software. We want to share knowledge with the others, like, hey guys, I implemented this functionality in that way. What do you think? You can learn from it. We need to share knowledge. We want to learn from each other, and that's very important. Second is when, and this question has two sub-questions. The first one, when I should implement the code review. Is it during the implementation, which means that we do programming pairing and I get notifications and feedback while I'm implementing my functionalities, and that's very efficient, especially if you have a big pull request. Or after I finish all my implementation, I make sure everything works fine and pass all the tests. Then I ask people to give me their opinion about the pull request. And of course, that will be helpful to get feedbacks and do small modifications. The second part of this question is, when should I consider the pull request is complete? When we say the code is good and we can merge to the main branch. And that depends. Either when all the raised comments are addressed by the author, or when all the reviewers agree that this code is fine and can be merged to the main branch. The third question is, who's going to be involved in this process? And this is a very important question. So, and that answering this question depends on the goal of this pull request. So if I'm trying to find issues and problems in my pull request, of course, seniors and tech lead and architect lead, they are perfect in reading complex code and finding issues in that. However, if my goal is to see how simple my code is, readable, reusable, then junior are really perfect fit for that job. The other question is where, and here I'm referring to the physical place where I'm going to implement this code review process. So either by programming pairing, and especially when you have big and complex pull requests, that will help really to resolve a lot of ambiguities and many issues between the author and the reviewer. It can be done if the pull request is small, and by small here I refer to like I have a pull request with only one class or one functionality with a few tens of lines of code, then I can check out this pull request to my local environment, test it, run it, make sure that everything is fine or not, and submit my review. It can be done also during using those code review like software like Bitbucket or GitLab. We can organize face-to-face meeting, video conference, etc. That depends really on the situation and the size of the pull request. The most important question is the what. And here's a story. When I joined my company, so my manager asked me, hey, Maha, can you have a look, review this code? Then I asked him what I'm supposed to look at exactly. So he answered, make sure it works. It's fine, whatever that means. So for me, what I did, actually, I tried to give my opinion. I started by looking, okay, where are the unit tests? It's not provided. Okay, the size of the method, it's too long. You are not following the naming convention. So here what I tried to do, actually, I give my personal opinion, and that based on my experience. So answering this question is very important, and that leads me to what we call the pull request checklist. Prior starting any code review pull request, any code review, as a team, we should agree on what we call PR checklist. So I'm going to insist on the fact that there is no one fits all checklist to do the code review. This can vary based on the team and the project and the company. But based on my experience, I can recommend those points that both author and reviewer should agree on. So first of all, I should make sure that there is unit tests provided, the changed code passed all the tests, integration tests, and doesn't break any of the existing tests. I should make sure that there is documentation provided. I should make sure that the style and the format of that code aligns with the style and the format of the overall project. And there are many tools can help me in that. So this can be automated. For example, for Python, there is Pylint, there is Flake, there is Flake 8, there is Black. There are other tools for the other programming languages. I should make sure that there is no any code smell in my code. And there is also tools can do static analysis for my code. For example, SonarQube can do static analysis of your code, give you a report showing if there are smells in the code, what the tech lead, what that take debt, and if there are some security holes, etc. So we can benefit from those tools. I should make sure that there is no redundancy. I should make sure that all the dependency for the new code, added code, as they are provided, and so on. As you can see, the list can get longer, and I re-insist on the fact there is no one fits all pull request checklist. This can be adapted. Well, the last question is how? How can I do an effective and efficient code review process? And I should start by automating everything you can. As I mentioned just earlier, the formatting, the style, the code smell can be done by existing tools. So as a reviewer, I should focus my effort in things cannot be automated. I should not look at those things and waste my effort. Second of all, I should answer in timely fashion way, which means I get a pull request. I will not let the author wait 3 months until he gets my answer. And that really depends on the size, which leads us to the third point, which is submit always. It's better if you submit small pull requests in terms of the size. Last but not least, of course, complying with the checklist we just presented. Last but not least is resolving, which means that as a reviewer, you accept or reject. I hate word reject because the goal is really to ship the code to industry. And if there are ambiguities, we said that you should resolve this ambiguity by having a call, discussion, asking question between the author and the reviewer. Here is an example of both reviewers and author that should follow while they are doing the code review. So don't criticize the person, instead analyze the code, give feedback, and provide guidance. Don't use harsh language, be polite and kind. And here there is an empirical study has been done by Microsoft in 2015, shows that very negative comments were considered useful around only 57% of the time, while the more neutral comments were useful around 80% of the time. So be kind. Instead, you should assume always competence, and you should provide context. Here's a small example of feedback that a reviewer had for pull request. So he's saying, why are you using this approach? You are adding unnecessary complexity. While it's supposed to be and better to be written that way, this concurrency model appears to be adding complexity to the system without any visible performance benefit. The difference between the two comments, the first one is you are criticizing the person, it's subjective, you are really concentrating on you are doing that. While the second one, which is the better and recommended, is you are criticizing the code itself. Well, I reached the end of my talk, and for those who fell asleep, hopefully no one fell asleep, this is the most important slide as takeaway. First of all, the goal always to ship the code to industry and not to prove how smart you are. Second, human review should be focused on things cannot be automated. So let things can be automated to those tools that can help us to do that. Third, always be careful, be respectful and kind when you are writing your comments, because respectful reviews will lead to useful reviews and sufficient reviews. Last but not least, keep in mind that your code doesn't represent who you are. Don't take it personally. Well, here's the list of references I have used to prepare this talk. It has been a great fun giving this talk. I appreciate your presence and your time. Thank you.
So Maha, I think you have some question on WhatsApp.
All right. Yes, that's great. Yeah. Go ahead.
S'il y a des gens qui ont des questions pour Maha et qui n'osent pas le faire en anglais, on peut le faire.
Oui, vous pouvez poser les questions en français. Il n'y a pas de souci. Yes.
I'm just curious about your opinion. Do you think it's better to have only one reviewer in the PR or several, not 10 reviewers, but probably 2 or 3?
Yeah. So the question is having only one reviewer or multiple reviewers? And I'm going to answer. This is a really very important question. I had it in mind, and that's why I proposed this talk. When I joined the team, that's the same case happened. So that really depends on the PR and the goal from the PR. So in general, if what's recommended is really, if there are people are involved and impacted by your code, they should be involved. That's for sure. Because your code might break something that they have done. So it's better to add multiple reviewers. But there are like some pull requests, like I do it quickly, like 2-3 lines of code, fixing something just pop up. This you need just to add one reviewer. So it depends really, you adjust. Yes, depends on the size of the pull request and who is involved.
Okay,
You're welcome. Other questions, Fabien, or no? Yeah?
La question c'est comment tu gères quand il y a des questions de goût ou d'avis qui sont assez divergents entre un reviewer et...
I didn't understand.
How do you manage when the reviewer has a different opinion of the code produced by the developer?
You mean there is conflict between the reviewers themselves?
No,
or
a question of taste. Maybe someone wants to do it imperatively, the other one wants to use the stream.
Yeah.
Different approach of the way of coding.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is Fabien asking is if there is a conflict between the author and the reviewer. So each of them has his own way of implementing the same functionality, which happens in computer science. We have really thousands of ways probably to do the same thing. So how can we resolve that? And this is a very important question. There are plenty of research about this resolving conflict. So one of the recommendations is when I give my opinion as a reviewer, I should provide guidance and why I based on what I made this comment. And as an author, also it's good when we said that you should provide documentation, not only documentation, the overall documentation. It's also documentation aligned between for each, not each line, but the most important lines of code in your pull request, highlighting why you made that decision. And always, if there are guidance or materials that you use to make that decision, you should provide them. And then, of course, there will be a discussion. You should open a dialogue, yeah, asking a question and have this conversation between both of them.
Thank you, Maha.
Thank you very much, everyone.